What's up, guys? Lefty here. I'm starting a new series of videos, and this will be the first installment. With baseball coming into full swing, I want to talk a little bit about how we approach handicapping or researching games. Baseball's the ultimate numbers game. There's hundreds of different stats we can look at in order to find a player or team's strengths and weaknesses. I'm going to do a series on a bunch of different baseball metrics we can look at during our research process. Each video will have a different metric that I'll explain in detail and kind of do a deep dive. When you research games, you want to have a process and an approach. You don't want to be wasting time just looking at various stats. Research with a purpose. And what I mean by that is ask a question about a game and find the answers through the numbers. Let the numbers tell the story. There's a few key stats I like to use in order to evaluate teams, but I also want to discuss a betting strategy that we will use with these key stats. When we look at two teams, the first thing we notice usually is starting pitching. For most bettors, a lot of the reasoning behind betting a team has to do with the two starting pitchers. If that's the case, you want to isolate that part of the game. And what I mean by that is limit the amount of variables that will impact the game outside of the starting pitchers. The way we can do this is by betting first halves or first 5 innings of baseball games. Every book offers this bet option. And again, if your reasoning for betting a game is largely based on starting pitching, then you should want the outcome to be decided by starting pitching, not by bullpen pitchers or middle relievers. How many times have you bet a game or, a total, and it was completely altered by bullpens, either blown saves or both bullpens, allowing a bunch of runs, messing up under bets. The first 5 innings will eliminate a lot of that bullpen variance we see. It's such a big drop-off in ability and talent from starters to bullpen pitchers. And, if you think about it, it makes sense. These bullpen guys are usually failed starters. No prospect is coming into the league as a relief pitcher. The bullpen guys are typically, guys who didn't have what it takes to be a starter. Now, of course, there's times you want each team's bullpen to be factored into the outcome of games you bet. Maybe one team has a much better bullpen than the other team. And that could be the extra edge you want in a game you bet. But again, if your analysis is in large part to do with starting pitching, limit the variance and bet the first halves. Now, speaking of pitching, in this series of videos I'm going to start to focus on some key stats we can look at in order to identify who has the edge in pitching matchups. For this exact video here, I'm looking at the velocity metric. The site Fangraphs is awesome. It's free. They have pretty much anything and everything you'll need for breaking down a game. We are in what's considered the home run era, where hitters are all about elevate and celebrate. Tracking a pitcher's velocity patterns can give you a great idea if the pitcher's lost a step or gained one. And if a pitcher's velocity is down compared to previous seasons or up, you can gain a solid predictive edge on how he will perform or likely perform. It's still a bit too early in the season now to weigh a pitcher's velocity too heavily, but we want to monitor it and kind of look for patterns and see where they're trending. But just the velocity metric alone isn't really enough. What I like to do with most stats is combine them with others. This will give you a better idea on evaluating teams or players. So if we look at a pitcher and see that his velocity is decreasing from previous seasons, one thing we also have to consider is he locating his pitches? Does he have command? If he's accurate and has command over his pitches, that's going to camouflage his lowering velocity, and he might not get exposed as much as he would if he wasn't commanding his pitches. But if we notice a pitcher with lowering velocity and we look at his walk rate or base on ball per 9, a pitcher with a lowering velocity who's also walking batters or not commanding his pitches, that's who we want to target and bet against. Losing velocity but not locating pitches will eventually spell doom for that pitcher. So combining stats, or what's called layering stats, it's going to be a great way to give you a more accurate predictive value. So velocity and walks per 9 are a good combination. But always remember, the sample size is going to be so important. You don't want to look at 1 or 2 game dip in velocity and assume the pitcher is losing a step. Same thing with walks per nine. He could have just faced a team that had a lot of plate discipline or patience and, just had more walks than normal, or maybe his arm wasn't feeling so good one game and that's why his velocity's down. Sample size will be key with all these metrics. That way we can identify what's real or what's a fluke. I do want to take a look at some pitchers this season who have some increased velocity. So if we go to Fangraphs, you want to go into the leaders section, pitching 2021. Who's a pitcher right now that has some increased velocity? Casey Mize is one of them. If we look at Casey Mize, if I can find him. Oh, actually, pitch info first. Velocity here. It's real simple to find. Now it's going to show you basically leaderboards, player stats, pitching. Down, we got pitch info and velocity. Okay, so shows you every pitch type and the velocity. VFA, that's a four-seam fastball or just fastball. That's the most common pitch for every pitcher. But they also have the cutter fastball, sinker, sinker here, changeup, slider, curve. They even have knuckle curve here. Not many pitchers throw that. But anyway, let's see, Casey Mize here. Okay, let's look at him. I know he has increased velocity. I just don't know about the walks per nine here. Let me see. Okay, so he's a younger pitcher. Really, we only have one season in the bigs to look back at, but we can see he's trending up. I mean, that's a pretty big jump right there over, just about 2 miles per hour. Base on balls per nine is down if we look at this column here. So it's something we want to look at. I'm expecting big things from him, or increased production anyway, because that's a big jump in velocity there. Corbin Burns is another interesting one. I don't know. Well, I forget what his base on balls are per nine, but I know he's up. If we look here, last year 95.8, he's jumped up to 97.4. That's a huge spike. He hasn't walked a batter yet, but again, only 18 innings. We can't jump to any conclusions here. But that big of a spike right there, especially early on in the season, that's definitely something I'm paying attention to. Now, on the flip side, I guess, decreased velocity. Luis Castillo, I believe he's down this year. He has a big sample size because he's been in the league, since he was so young. But let's see where he's at for this season. Okay, he's down a little bit from last year, but he's pretty much where he's at for, his career average. I guess since, before 2017, that was his peak, and last year was his peak. But keeping an eye on his base on balls, it's down right now. But again, 15 innings pitched, too small of a sample size to really take anything from. But he's down from last year. One more guy. I wanted to look at Scherzer. He's a popular pitcher. He gets a lot of action when he pitches, as far as like the public betting him. And I know his velocity's down because I targeted him last outing he had, and this was one of the reasons. Scherzer. But again, it's still such a small sample size. This is more for being ahead of the game here. Tracking and looking for patterns here for pitchers. But Scherzer is down at a career low right now. Actually, if you look, yeah, he's at the lowest velocity right now of his career. Base on balls is down a little bit, but again, we want to keep an eye on this. It's only 19 innings pitched. We want at least to see 30-ish in that 40 range before we start drawing it to any conclusions. But The way player and team performances are measured today, it's just so crazy. I mean, it's evolved so much with the use of Sabermetrics. So if you're using ERA or hits or even wins and losses, you're really shorting yourself, because there's stats now that eliminate all the noise and can just show you a pitcher's performance to date and get a pretty accurate idea of how that pitcher will perform in the future, or how he likely will perform in the future. Real quick, like even if we just take a look at like FIP, this will tell you how a pitcher has performed. FIP stands for Fielder Independent Pitching, and what it does, it cuts into just like what the pitcher is responsible for. Strikeouts, walks, hit batters, and home runs, basically eliminating the defense altogether. And this is what makes FIP a better indicator of pitching performance rather than ERA. FIP will tell you how a pitcher has performed, or which pitcher will have value independent of the defense. And then, you got xFIP, which will, tell you how well a pitcher's ability or talent, how he is performing independent of their defense. And really, once you get familiar with, some of these metrics, it gets pretty simple reading them. Like, for example, with xFIP, it uses the same scale as ERA does. So if you look at a pitcher's xFIP numbers, for example, let's say 3.0, that would translate, to how well you think a pitcher is with a 3.0 ERA. The scale is intentionally identical to ERA, so reading xFIP is easier and you don't have to convert. But I'll save all that stuff kind of for a future video. But again, really, it's these metrics that you want to kind of pay attention to rather than the more common ones like ERA and hits, and definitely wins and losses don't tell a true story of a pitcher's performance. But that's going to do it for this video. Any members who are watching this video, if something's not clear or I went too fast, just shoot me a message in the Discord community. And that goes for non-members too. It's free to join the Discord. The link will be in the description. So after these videos, I want to start the discussion in the community to really make sure everything's clear. Hopefully we'll see some of you guys in the community soon. Until next time, good luck, and may all the umps calls go your way.